Well, look, I'll tell people that you are very big in the podcasting world.
I was being a bit self-deprecating.
Yes.
I mean, I am a professional. Like, I'm not just
very
a bloke.
big in the podcast. Last night, you won what I like to call the Richard Herring Award at the Chortle Awards.
Is that right?
Which I like to call it that, yeah.
Right.
Which is the best podcast award. I just won it a lot in the early days.
Weren't even nominated this year.
When there were no other podcasts.
Oh, I see.
So I won about 5 times in a row.
Right.
And then other people started doing podcasts. And then I didn't. I think I maybe won it one more time.
Okay.
After the initial flurry. So I think when I'm dead, they're going to call it the Richard Herring Award.
Right.
So, you've won the Richard Herring Award. So you won last night with 3 bean salad. Which
Yeah.
is there we go. They all know who you are.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of podcasts. One's called 3 Bean Salad, which is with Henry Packer, who you also haven't heard of, and Mike Wozniak, who's swiftly becoming sort of Housewives' favourite. He brings with him an audience of horny mothers. He does. I mean, that's the mainstay of our listenership.
Is it just the moustache, do you think? Because that's sort of...
Someone said yes in the audience.
Yeah.
I think he has a je ne sais quoi about him.
Yeah.
That really, like, if you're a 45-year-old mother...
Yeah.
Oh. I don't know why. Yeah, and it's the kind of one of those... it's the kind of podcast I thought I'd never make, really, which is just like 3 dickheads chatting.
Yeah. Well, most podcasts are 2 dickheads chatting. And you've thought, let's add another dickhead in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's in 3D now, basically.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so there's that. So I do that, and I do another podcast called the Beef and Dairy Network. All right, that's pretty
I
good.
love the way you said that, leaving a little pause for the applause. That's good. And then going, why? What? I do a podcast called Stone Clearing with Richard Herring. This is not as popular as this is my audience. It's terrible. So tell us about what the beef and I always call it the Milk and Dairy podcast, which would be stupid because milk is dairy.
Exactly. The Beef and Dairy Network podcast is a comedy podcast that's in the guise of an industry podcast for the beef industry. And whenever I describe it, it sounds very, very bad. Very, very bad. But it's good. And it's kind of like... It's slightly inspired by yourself, Richard.
Really?
Because I've liked you for a long time. It sounds like I'm obsessed with you.
Yeah.
I'm not. But what I like about your stuff is, like even Stone Clearing, which we've established nobody listens to, right?
They don't.
It's that thing of like taking an idea, having an idea that's a bit silly, and then just doing it relentlessly.
Yes.
For, in my case, 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years is good.
And for that, almost that to be the funny thing.
Yeah.
The kind of act of doing something that's a bit obscure and then keep going, not stopping, no matter what happens. I find that funny in itself, and I don't know if anyone else does. I think you do, because that...
I definitely do.
Yeah. And I was really inspired by... You did a stand-up show that I weirdly never saw, but I heard about and was inspired by, which was one where you... At the start of the show, you talk about how you go to a supermarket and then you're buying some yogurts.
Yeah.
And then the woman behind the counter says, someone likes yogurts.
Yeah.
And then you just talked about that exclusively for an hour.
I did do shows that were that for an hour. The actual show had a couple of other bits in it as well. So,
Sell out.
So in the tour show, it was the second half of the show.
Okay.
And maybe
I like it
45
less.
minutes.
I like it less
Yeah.
now. But that kind of, like, that's a stupid idea,
Yeah.
but you did it. And I think anything like I really respect people who do, like, stupid stuff.
Yes.
And then just keep going with it.
I agree. Well, me too. But, it doesn't bring any money in, does it? That's no one's prepared to pay for it. But it's a bit more, it is, there's a lot to it, because it is sort of a parody of something that doesn't exist, or maybe didn't exist. I mean, I kind of like, that's what I liked about Stone Clearing, was the idea of creating a podcast that nobody needed. An instructional podcast on how to clear stones off a field, which is very, you can do it in a sentence. Pick up the stones and put them off the field. So to have like a long-running, as a guide to stone clearing. But there is more to it, because then, it's an
like over time
thing.
it's created a bit of a world. There's running characters. It's like a character comedy thing, really.
Yeah, but you parody quite lots of different
Yeah.
And you've got very good people coming in. I was listening to one with Nick Offerman from, I'm going to say, it's Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, yeah.
And the Emmy Award-winning actor in the Last of Us and all those things. Was it called The Last of Us? That thing he's just won.
Yes.
So that's how did you get him on for us? I mean, the rest of them, I understand how you got them on. There's some good people on there. But they're all people who I imagine you've met on the comedy circuit.
Yeah.
But Nick Offerman seemed a bit of a left field.
You can kind of email anyone these days. It's kind of true, right? And if you, my podcast was picked up by an American podcast network, so some people who work there kind of had a little bit of an in somewhere, but not much of an in. And you can just ask people things. And I think sometimes if you ask someone and say, do you want to play an outdoorsman who travels exclusively on the back of cattle, and you send that to a Hollywood star, one time in 150, they'll go, okay. And so, I get a lot of people not replying to the email. But he just did it, and then was excellent. And then I had this problem. Do you do this, Richard? You've probably got this now with me. When you get someone on your podcast who's quite famous, quite exciting, it spills over for me into not only do I want this recording to go well and for it to be funny and for people to enjoy it when they listen to it, I want them to be my friend. Yeah.
Well, I asked Michael Palin to be my dad, and my dad's still alive, so...
And the problem is that bit can never happen because you'll never see them again. Although, weirdly, he did invite me to his stand-up show in London. And I thought, this is it, we're going to be best friends. And then he was just a bit curt.
That was he.
Yeah. But in a totally normal way. I was being the weird one,
Yeah.
Because I was sort of planning our wedding, essentially.
Well, you met him afterwards, and did you say...
I met him afterwards, but
I'm Ben, I did that thing with you. Did you say that because he might just look like a guy who'd wandered into the dressing room?
Well, this was the thing. So it was in Royal Festival Hall. Okay. So it's quite a big place. Yeah, nice. And he said, come to the green room afterwards. So I was like, okay. So I got to the green room, and then I realised I was one of 50 people he'd said this to.
Okay.
I know.
What a whore. What a whore he is.
And they were all quite weird people. I don't know who they were. They were just 49 weirdos and me. And they were all being quite needy and weird to him in a way that I would have been. But because I saw them doing it to him, I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I just said, nice to meet you. Goodbye. And then I just walked into the Thames.
It doesn't sound like him being that off with it. That sounds like you being a bit off with
but it was just, the whole situation was weird. And he realised, of course we're not going to strike up. I'm never going to see the man again. It's fine. But when you do have these people on, you do slightly think, maybe this is the beginning of the rest of my life.
Nothing has ever happened at the 700 interviews I've done.
Yeah.
No one has even asked. No, actually, Louis...
What do you want them to ask you?
No. Well, asked me to, do anything. No, Louis Theroux is the only person...
Right.
He was on. We talked about Jimmy Savile quite a lot in that interview.
Yeah.
Because... just for fun. No, because he'd interviewed Jimmy Savile and failed to notice he was a massive pedo, which... I've spotted every single pedo I've had on the show. You wonder why you've been asked on.
This is your life.
So he then.
What a way to publicly out paedophiles that would be, though.
It would be good.
You'd be doing a service.
It's a new podcast. God, my guest is a pedo, but doesn't know that I know. I've given it away in the title. Probably won't mention that to them. This is all part of the title. I won't mention that before. I'll pretend it's one of my other podcasts.
Yeah.
So they don't know. Louis Theroux invited me to come and watch a play about Jimmy Savile with him after we talked about Jimmy Savile.
And did you go?
Yeah, we went out and had a nice time.
And did you ever see him again? No.
So that was the closest I came to making a friend. Tony Robinson said he'd made a really good friend and was going to be my friend, but I've never seen him again. I didn't like him that much. I didn't want he's not like Baldrick in real life at all. If he was like Baldrick, that'd be fun.
I remember he did an Edinburgh show one year when I was in Edinburgh, and I read an interview with him in the press, and he'd said, I decided to do this Edinburgh show, and I was getting quite stressed about it, and then I just smoked a joint, and then I wrote it in 3 hours. And I thought, that must be shit. And I felt like he had such contempt for the audience that he'd written his show in 3 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking to the wrong person because that's kind of what you do. But
well, I just make up a show. I wouldn't write an Edinburgh show. I don't think I'd do. Well, no. I would do an improvised Edinburgh show, but I wouldn't. Yeah, it takes a little longer to to create.
It's when celebrities do a show and then like a large part of it is a Q&A. You're like, come on, come on.
But I tell you, Stephen Fry has improvised shows.
Yeah, in the Royal Albert Hall, I think he did it. Yeah,
and can definitely do it.
yeah. No, there are people who can do it.
There are people who can do it.